Welcome back to the Healing Energy Collective. I'm Scarlett Chang, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Dr. Cortney Warren. Dr. Cortney is an award winning, board certified clinical psychologist, author, and adjunct clinical professor at the University of Nevada. She is an expert on addictions, self deception, romantic relationships, eating pathology, and the practice of psychotherapy from a cross cultural perspective. Dr. Courtney has co authored more than 50 peer reviewed journal articles, delivered over 75 professional talks, and written 2 books for the public: Letting Go of Your Ex, CBT Skills to Heal the Pain of a Breakup and Overcome Love Addiction, and Lies We Tell Ourselves, The Psychology of Self-Deception. Her insights have been featured in numerous national outlets, and her TEDx talk, Honest Liars, has been viewed almost 2 million times. Breakups can be brutal. They can feel like withdrawal, a consuming ache, and sometimes even like a kind of addiction. In her book, Dr. Courtney offers evidence based tools grounded in cognitive behavioral therapy to help people interrupt obsessive thinking, heal emotional wounds, and rebuild a life beyond their ex. In this episode, we'll talk about what love addiction means, even though it's not a formal clinical diagnosis, how breakups can trigger core beliefs and behaviors, what helps in the hardest moments, and how to step into your next chapter stronger than ever. If you've ever struggled to let go of someone or found yourself ruminating, longing, or stuck, you're not alone. This conversation is for you. Let's jump in. Welcome, Dr. Courtney. I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
To start, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and how you came to study love, relationships, breakup recovery, and write this amazing book, which I have here, Letting Go of Your Ex?
Absolutely. I was always really interested in psychology. So I am a clinical psychologist with an expertise in addictive behavior and eating pathology. I gave a TEDx talk a number of years ago now on the psychology of self-deception, how we lie to ourselves, how hard it is for us to tell the truth about who we are to ourselves. And in that talk, I used myself and my experiences dating and in romantic relationships and the struggles that I had as an example. And I had so many questions from students and from viewers and listeners about romantic love and about why it's so hard to go through breakups and why we can become so infatuated with a mate that I ended up writing this book. So that's really how I got here.
And Letting Go of Your Ex describes something called love addiction in breakups. And that can seem a little bit scary. Can you
Mhm.
explain what you mean by that and how lover breakups can feel addictive and how that differs from a normal breakup?
The idea of love addiction is actually not a new one, but it isn't a clinical diagnosis. So it's not something that you're going to come into my office or someone's office as a mental health professional and they're going to say, oh, you have love addiction. But there's emerging neurobiological psychological research looking at how we can become addicted to an experience or a process or even a person. So things like gambling, which is actually a diagnosis now, eating particularly highly processed foods, sex, online gaming, these kind of experiences where what we see clinically is that many people look like they're addicted to a person or to a food. And what I mean by that is, to begin with, the person becomes the most important thing in your life. just like if you were addicted to a drug. So you start to meet someone. Let's just describe this in terms of love, where you're out and you're dating and you meet this person and you start dating them and you start realizing that you're thinking about them all the time and you want to be with them and you're planning a future with them, and they become this central force in your life that makes you want to see them and be with them and touch them. And when we think about any kind of addictive behavior, that's kind of the first sign, is that this stimulus, this person becomes the most important thing in your life, really at the expense of anything else. And another characteristic is that it makes you feel euphoric, just like a drug. So being around this person makes you feel really good or not feel bad, at least in the beginning. And so you have this fixation, these thoughts, these cravings of being with this person because it makes you feel so good. And any efforts to stop being around them are really hard. So it's that idea of relapse, that you develop this tolerance, you develop this drive to spend as much time with them as possible, just like you would develop tolerance using a drug. And so when we think about love and its addictive nature, it's really this craving and hyper focus for one individual person who becomes the center of your world, and the difficulty that emerges when you break up, or if you know you're in a romantic relationship that's really, really unhealthy for you, but you're having a hard time leaving. That could also be a love addicted relationship, what we would refer to as love addiction.
So the difference is that there's that pattern of craving and more destructive behaviors afterwards.
There, particularly when it ends, for example. So let's say you feel addicted to your mate and it's euphoric and it's wonderful and you're in love and the two of you want to be together and it feels like this magical experience. And then something happens and you break up. Maybe they left you. Maybe they cheated. Maybe you realize that there was a deal breaker between you that you just couldn't stay anymore. When it ends, you essentially enter into a state of withdrawal where your ex is still the center of your life because they were the center of your life. They're your drug of choice, but they're not there anymore. And so there's this tendency to get in a cycle of wanting to be close to them again, wanting to feel close to them, wanting information about them. Usually what happens is you go through the breakup and you realize, I can't stop thinking about them. I'm still thinking about them all the time. I wake up in the morning and I'm thinking about them. I check my phone. I check my social media. I'm trying to figure out what they're doing or who they're with because I just am so desperate to talk to them or to work it out or to explain to them, all of the reasons that they have to change and why we should still be together. And it's that craving for contact, for intimacy again, that then often leads us to act in ways that we ultimately regret, because most of the time it's pretty impulsive and it's these efforts to feel close again. So it could be texting them, could be calling them when you know you shouldn't. It could be trying to run into them on campus or in class or at work. Those efforts, if you're broken up, usually lead us to feel even worse, because although in the moment it feels a little bit better, you get a little dopamine hit, you get a little bit of contact that actually will feel like a relief. In the long run, it's going to keep you fixated on this person who is no longer in your life. And so those behaviors that are aimed either at being closer to them again or at distracting yourself from the pain, which oftentimes are things that are self-harming. So trying to date a whole bunch of people, maybe impulsively having sex with other individuals as a distraction, or drinking, or staying in bed all day, or feeling really depressed and anxious, keep you in this cycle of fixation with your ex that ultimately lead you feeling worse about yourself and in this kind of miserable, stuck place emotionally.
Because you also talk about that it's not just the loss of this person, it's this loss of a fantasy of the future of shared activities, maybe your support group. And I know you talk about a lot in the book that one of the best ways to cut that contact is through something called no contact. Can you speak a little
Yeah.
bit more about that?
Ugh, it is so hard to get over an ex if you're still in touch with them, because there is this life that you probably built with them, either in person because you lived together and you actually shared a life, or in your own mind about what your life should be like together. And when you break up, generally everything changes. So if you stay in touch with your ex, it's like you're continuing to use your drug if you're addicted to them. It's like you're staying in a non-relationship relationship. You're trying to still be in this romantic relationship with someone who is no longer your partner. So I very strongly recommend for anybody who's going through a bad breakup where they really feel like they can't move on to go fully no contact with their ex. So no social media, no texting, no meeting up, no sex. It also includes removing things from your physical space that remind you of your ex. So, for example, if you have gifts from them, or letters from them, or their clothes, or their toothbrush, or that t shirt that they always borrowed when they were at your apartment, those things, all they're doing is reminding you of something that is no longer salient or relevant to your life anymore. And until you feel more confidently settled in your own skin, it's in your best interest to put them aside, get them out of your space. Your goal right now is to stop focusing on your ex and start focusing on yourself, on looking in the mirror and creating a new life without them in it.
And that's such an important reminder to widen your scope because so often we can get consumed by our partner and our relationship. And you also talk about in the book how the ending of a relationship can impact our self worth and our
Mm.
self talk. Can you speak a little bit more about that as well?
When we're in the throes of any addiction, it feels like the present moment is so centrally defining to who we are. For example, after a bad breakup, so many people will say things like, my life is over. No one's ever going to want me. I'm damaged goods. I'm never going to get over them. These are all lies. They're not true. And they're things that we have to work through. And there are tools to help people work through those self deceptive thought patterns. But it's really easy to be consumed with how bad you feel in the moment, such that you really conclude there's no point in going on. There's no point in dating. There's no point in anything anymore because this one relationship was it. It defined my whole life. And so, really learning to take that broad view, as you just said, that actually a breakup is just one small point in your much larger life context that started long before you met your ex and ideally is going to go on for many, many years to come, and that you aren't defined by this one relationship. And really convincing people, if I could just download into the anyone who's struggling with this, that this relationship does not define you. Your ex didn't define you. You define yourself. And really comprehending and grasping, and even if you don't believe it in the moment, working with some mantras, working with some self-talk that says, I am okay. I'm still me. I have the same value now as a single person that I had when I was dating my ex. That is so important to moving forward and feeling confident again about who you are and what matters in life to you, and that you have this much larger life to still live with other wonderful people who you may have neglected along the way if you were really focused on your ex.
There's an amazing section in your book where you break down some really common cognitive distortions, such as
all or nothing thinking or
Mhm.
catastrophizing.
Mhm.
And I don't want to give away everything in the book, but could you talk through how you explain all or nothing thinking in breakups and then how to work with those thoughts and I love how you tied it back to your TED talk on self deception as well.
Hmm. We humans are really good at lying to ourselves. And I think most of us don't realize that because we think that our thoughts are true, that they're truth with a capital T, that if I think it, it must be accurate, which is absolutely false. There are so many thoughts that every single one of us have going through our minds that are completely unfounded and have no factual support. So when we think about something like all or nothing thinking, which is very black and white, it's when we think right or wrong, good or bad, it's very extreme. Very few things in life are black and white. Almost everything is gray, and most of it depends. And when you're in the middle of a breakup, some really common all or nothing thinking would be things like, if we don't get back together, my life is over. It's good or bad. I'm never going to get over them. There's never going to be a future if my ex isn't in it. It's this polarized, I'm nothing without them, good or bad. And so part of working with yourself after a breakup is learning to evaluate your thinking patterns and ask yourself, well, is this accurate? Is this really true? And even if you're not sure that it's untrue, then asking yourself, is this helpful? Is this helping me? Does it help me to think that I'm never going to be able to move on and my life is over without them? I can 100% of the time tell you that that is not helpful. It's not going to lead you to good emotions or realistic emotions. It's not going to help you act in ways that are healthy for you. And so if you ask yourself, is this accurate and is this helpful? And the answer is no. Now you have to try to change your thinking to make it accurate and helpful for you. So in those situations, what I would recommend doing is really looking at what evidence do you have that your thought is true. So for example, if you think my life is over without my ex, what evidence do you have that that's true, that your life is over? Hmm. Well, oftentimes people will say to me, well, Dr. Warren, I just feel so bad. Okay, I know you do. I believe you, but is your life over? No, it really isn't. You're still alive. You're here. What evidence do we have that your life is not over? That in fact your thought is false? I'll say, well, I had a life before my ex. I'm young. There are millions of people literally in the world that I could date. I've dated other people in the past. I'm still a good person. I am kind, I'm thoughtful, I'm hardworking. I've made some mistakes, but I'm really interested in growing. And you will usually come up with this whole list of things where you'll say, wow, my thought is actually not true. Now is your change moment. Anytime you notice yourself going back into that harmful, untrue thought process, you have to pause and you have to say, I have to stop myself from thinking this. It's not accurate and it's not helpful for me. So the minute I catch myself, I'm going to say, actually, this has been really painful. I never want to go through a breakup like this again. Probably true. But I'm still me and I can get through this and I'm okay. And I'm going to learn about myself through this breakup so that hopefully in my next relationship, I don't find myself in the same situation again. And you are going to start repeating those helpful, true statements to yourself over and over and over again, as long as you need to, until you start believing them, until you start realizing that that is actually what is going to propel you forward.
And what's so important to remember is that it takes time and consistency, right? It's not just, I'm going to do this once and then all of a sudden I'm going to feel better. It's
Mhm.
training a muscle.
It is training a muscle. It takes practice, and it actually takes a lot of deliberate effort. As anyone who's ever gone through a bad breakup or a really rough divorce knows, breakups are really difficult, even if you're not addicted to your ex. Nobody really wants to live through a breakup. They're just pretty universally negative. But if you were madly in love with someone, if you built a life with someone, if you felt that strong euphoric emotional pull toward this person and thought they complete me, which is a lie. I want to build a future with them. I see myself as their partner in this life. And then it ends. It is going to be very difficult to move on. But here's the beautiful thing. You can learn tools that will help you along the way so that it doesn't break you, so that it doesn't make you bitter, so that it doesn't allow you to succumb to the suffering that can accompany breakups. That is a choice. And that is a choice that every single one of us have when we enter into this world. And you actually have more power than you think when you go through a breakup to help yourself through it. And it's actually through that empowerment, through that realization that you actually do have control over some things, even if you didn't want the breakup and you had no control over your ex, which is true. You can't control other people. Another really common deceptive thinking pattern that we tend to go through when we're in breakups, where we think I can change them or they'll change and we'll get back together. But as you really embrace that you do have control over yourself, you do have control over making choices that are going to help you and not hurt you, the stronger you're going to become and the better you're going to feel about yourself. And the more confident you're going to get in your own skin as you re-enter the world as ideally actually a changed, more evolved, more honest, more authentic version of yourself, which is really a gift, right? It's really a gift when you can go through a painful experience and say, gosh, that was brutal. I never want to do that again. But I'm actually better for it in some ways. I'm actually grateful for it in some ways because it made me who I am now. And I might never have pushed myself or really struggled through in order to get to this level of growth if I hadn't had the hardship, because I wouldn't have been motivated to do it because it's too painful. And really owning that and proving to yourself, trusting yourself enough to say, I can handle it. I can do it. This is my life and I'm responsible for it, is powerful.
I love this idea of empowerment and taking back the control. But
Mhm.
also on the flip side, I'm curious of your thoughts of self blame as a form of
Mhm.
perceived control. Because some
Mhm.
people, myself included, when I go through a breakup, I think to myself, it was all my fault. And
Mhm.
I need to figure out why it went wrong, what I did wrong. And then it seems like it's a form of control, but it's actually not.
Mm. Mhm. It's really a slippery slope because, on the one hand, it is not in anyone's best interest psychologically to feel shame, meaning to personally feel like a bad person for a choice that you made or for a pattern that you have or for some mistakes, right? But it is really, really important going through a breakup for us to look in the mirror and say, what did I do to contribute to this dysfunction? What did I do to contribute to picking this person who was maybe not good for me, or to putting myself in a relationship where I wasn't appreciated, or maybe you brought actually quite a dysfunctional pattern to your relationships because of your own insecurities, which is quite common, especially early in dating relationships for people, because oftentimes we've lived through some difficult early childhood experiences as humans. And if you have, it's very likely that you brought those with you into your dating experiences and maybe actually hurt some of the people that you dated. So in that way, it's really helpful for all of us to look at that and to say, okay, what am I responsible for here? What do I need to learn about myself because it harmed them or it harmed me? But that's not the same as taking control through self-blame and self-negativity. One is trying to be an objective observer of yourself in the interest of learning, not beating yourself up, of learning. And the other is really a self-deprecating, almost self-flagellating, like I'm beating myself up continually response to the breakup. So I think you want one and you don't want the other. When you notice yourself continually bad-mouthing yourself over something, stop. It's not helpful for you, and it's not probably accurate. Ask yourself, how would I respond to my friend saying these things? There's something they have to learn, but if it was somebody I really loved, I wouldn't let them say these things to themselves because they're not true and they're not helpful. But I would want to respectfully and lovingly help them unpack how they got there, because that is really a gift. When someone knows you intimately and loves you and is willing to tell you some hard realities because they have your best interest at heart, be grateful. Those are the kind of friends you want in your life. You don't want people in your life who will only tell you the positives. You want someone that you can trust enough to say, actually, this is something I notice you do with everybody you date, and I think it's really, really a problem. And you say, ooh, thank you. Let me think about that some more. I can give you an example. I remember when I was in college, I had my first massive falling in love experience. And I brought into my relationships a great deal of early childhood trauma. At the time, I wasn't very aware of it. I couldn't have told you what core beliefs I had about myself that I was bringing into this love romantic relationship. But I was very strongly. And I remember there was a night where my boyfriend came to my dorm room and he was going out with his friends. And he literally came into my room and said, Cortney, I'm going out with my friends. I just wanted to come in and give you a kiss. I'll see you tomorrow. And I burst into tears, like sobbing uncontrollably. And he looked at me and he said, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I said, I don't know. Because the truth is, I did not know. And he looked me straight in the eye and said, I don't know what's wrong with you, but if you keep acting like this, we're never going to make it. And the truth was, he was right. Because my reaction had absolutely nothing to do with him. There was nothing wrong with him going out with his friends. There was nothing wrong with him coming to say, I love you. I'm going out. Have a great night. The reason I had that reaction is because I grew up in a household where I didn't trust men at all, ever. And the idea of him going out with a bunch of guys was terrifying to me and triggering and had nothing to do with him. So in that moment, that was part of my own journey of trying to understand what is wrong with me. Why am I crying? He's not doing anything wrong. I objectively knew, the rational part of me knew there's nothing wrong with this situation. Why am I having this emotional reaction? The only way I'm going to heal this is to look in the mirror and work on myself. And that's really that journey, right? Of understanding that I actually was damaging my relationship with him because of my reactions that had nothing to do with him. And I needed to understand that in order to start my healing journey and to be sure that I could eventually be in romantic relationships where I wasn't reacting that way because it was very harmful. Does that make sense?
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that example because I think myself and a lot of people that are listening have this experience where they have trust issues, where things come up and they don't know what's coming to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And using this example, can you share a few ways that you're able to heal this core wound of trust?
Oh, yes. Well, finding a good therapist is point number one, especially if you're struggling, because I strongly believe in the power of psychotherapy. Obviously, I'm a psychologist, so I'm very biased here, but it can be incredibly healing to have an educated mental health professional to walk this journey with you, who can offer you some tools and some reflection and be a very safe, trustworthy sounding board for you as you explore yourself. So, point one, find a good therapist. I also did a lot of things to start working with myself. So, I journal every day and started doing that in college. And I would strongly recommend that as a mechanism of self discovery and of self reflection, because it's a very safe space for you to describe what emotional experiences you have and to start looking at yourself from the platform of what can I learn? How do I feel? Where am I most insecure? Why am I that way? In the book, I also use a monitoring log that really helps people track their own thinking and emotion patterns over the course of a day. And I find that to be incredibly helpful. I found it helpful for myself also, but incredibly helpful when people are just getting through the beginning of a breakup in particular, where you're in that first week or you're in that first month and you're really struggling to function kind of on a daily basis. I think you can get so much rich information about yourself by trying to understand what your patterns are. So, how do you tend to think in your mind? How do you tend to emotionally feel? Where are you most likely to struggle? What time of day? Um, how can you intervene in those moments to help yourself? So, you would log also any interventions you're doing with yourself, any tools you're trying to learn as you realize you're having a hard time. So, for example, distress tolerance, which is really a DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy based skill where you really learn to sit with pain without trying to escape from it. So, in that moment after my boyfriend left my room and I was sobbing, I sat on my floor for probably a half an hour, just sitting, just being with the feeling, just letting myself experience it. That's a tool. That's something that's really hard to learn to do, actually, and to do deliberately with the intention of helping yourself process emotion or understand your emotion. Another really useful tool is radical honesty. This, in a breakup situation, would be actually telling yourself the truth about your current relationship status. So, those moments where you're desperate and you want to reach out and you want to call them and you want answers and you want whatever, you say, right now we are broken up and I am going to act in that reality. We are no longer together. I am not going to call them. I am not going to reach out. I am going to accept at some level that it is over. And until that changes, I'm creating a life without them. So you would start to practice these tools as you learn where your biggest struggles are and where your sort of main difficult times of day or situations that are most challenging for you emerge in your life by becoming more aware of them. And then as you do that, as you really start to manage the moment, your experiences in the moment each day, now you're going to find yourself with the opportunity to do a deeper dive. At some point, once you can manage your symptoms enough that you're going to class and you're going to work and you're meeting friends and you're doing some self care and you're more functional, Now you're going to have to ask yourself some of those deeper questions about how you got here, why you were attracted to them in the first place, where you learned perhaps really unhelpful beliefs about romantic relationships and love from a very early age, what your family background was like, what your cultural learning was, what you learned about love, how people treated each other, what it was supposed to be like. That will give you a much more profound exploration of who you are and how you got here in the first place that you need to do as part of your healing to not bring those same learnings into your future relationships. Because one thing that's very clear is that it's really common for people to date someone and go through a breakup and then jump into the next relationship and date a version of your ex and then break up and then date the next version of your ex where you're still picking the same kind of people. You're still bringing your same patterns. You're still having trust issues that you haven't worked through and blaming them instead of looking at yourself, right? And so really doing that deeper dive is so important, but it usually comes after you've gotten some tools to really work with yourself when you're struggling with symptoms in the moment. And I've used all of these tools in my own life in addition to using them with clients. And I think they can be incredibly helpful if you're going through a rough breakup.
Share the difference between distress tolerance and allowing emotions to consume you. Like, for example, if I was coming to you and I had a feeling of anxiety
Mhm.
from a similar situation where my partner went out and I didn't know what was going on, I feel really anxious. I'm sitting there.
Mhm.
How would you explain or teach me distress tolerance in that moment?
Mm, such an important question. And I think I want to just be very clear to anyone listening that there are many tools to practice and learn, and that distress tolerance isn't always the one I would recommend. It really depends on the situation. So it may be that if you were in a moment like I was and you were feeling really anxious, instead of practicing distress tolerance, I would say, okay, stop. I want you to get out your journal. I want you to write down everything that's going through your mind. And I want us to look for any unhelpful or distorted thinking in there, any red flag thinking. And I want us to unpack that. Or I might say, you know what, you're feeling anxious. This is the time where I want you to call your friend. Or this is the time that you should go outside and go for a walk and change scenery. And it isn't that any one tool is better or worse than another. It's that you will be in the process of figuring out what's most helpful for you in each situation. And the more tools you have at your disposal, the better. Because distress tolerance is a great thing to practice, where it's learning to sit with negative emotion. And there are situations you're going to encounter in life where you really need that. So, for example, let's say you work together or you go to school together with your ex and you are on your way to class and they pass you and you have this right immediate anxious visceral sad reaction. You still may need to go to class. This might be a time where you really need to practice distress tolerance because you aren't in a position where you can whip out your journals or go for a walk or use one of the many other skills to really cognitively unpack what's going on. It might be a time where you need to be able to say, I feel really negative emotion right now. I am really struggling and I'm going to sit through it anyway. And I'm going to show up to class and I'm going to sit in my chair and I know I'm really distressed, but I'm going to say, I can do this. I'm going to tolerate the emotion and understand. I think this is the key part of distress tolerance. Understand that the emotion will pass. Eventually, the emotion will lessen and I can handle it. It's not going to kill me. It's not going to break me. It's just a physiological, emotional response that's really, really unpleasant, but it's going to pass and I can get through it. And that's kind of the crux of distress tolerance, is learning that no physiological state or emotionally miserable feeling is going to stay there forever, and that you can actually handle it. And then you have a host of other tools that are also aimed at helping you through it, that are, again, changing your scenery or working with your thinking patterns or getting some social support or getting some exercise. The more tools you have at your disposal, the more you're going to be able to work with yourself, no matter what the situation is that you're in.
Because life is always changing, and we go through these periods where, if it's not a romantic relationship, maybe it's our career or our friendships, where we
Yes.
need to rebuild ourselves. And these tools that you have in the book, what I love about them is that they're so practical, not only for a breakup, but for life in general. And it's like
Mm.
what we were talking about earlier about lifting a weight. It's once you have this toolbox, you're able to resource yourself and practice these whenever something goes wrong or you have a perceived failure or a mistake.
The other thing that I love about tools, in addition to them just being really useful for people, is that you will start to develop confidence again the more that you use them, because you will realize that you have self-efficacy, meaning that you have the ability to help yourself through this. And as you actually prove to yourself that you can and show yourself that you can, you'll regain your confidence over time, or maybe gain confidence for the first time that you actually can do this. You're still you. You are growing and building and evolving. And so proving to yourself that you are capable of helping the healing process is really, really beneficial on so many levels.
And you also spoke to earlier how our previous circumstances and family dynamics can carry forward into our current relationships, whether romantic or not.
Mhm.
And I'm curious whether you've seen a relationship to love addiction and early childhood trauma.
There's a quite robust relationship, I would say, a very strong correlation. Doesn't mean causation, doesn't mean that if you had a difficult childhood that you're going to have difficulty in all of your relationships as an adult. But we know that attachment to adult caregivers as a child is really key to sort of having the framework for what a healthy adult romantic relationship looks like, because you believe to your core that humans are trustworthy, that you are lovable, that someone will be there for you, that you can depend on them and that they can depend on you. That's really kind of the crux of a secure attachment. Doesn't mean that you're not sad when they leave, doesn't mean that you um, sort of have the perfect, only happy interactions with them. But it means that at the center of it all, you're bonded in a really healthy way. And if you experience that with a parent or an adult when you were growing up, it's easy to see how that can translate into your dating relationships, where you meet someone new and you come into it with this core belief that I can be myself, you can be yourself, and we can trust each other and we can bond in a way that's really positive for each of us. The reality is that a lot of us have challenging early childhood experiences that led us to not feel very securely attached to our parents. It's also possible that you felt securely attached to your parent, but had general difficult experience as a child. So, for example, things like you had someone with a mental illness in your family, or you were abused or molested or neglected, or you were bullied or teased by your peers for your physical appearance or for your race or for any number of factors. It could be that you grew up in a really impoverished community that didn't feel safe or that wasn't actually safe. So when, as children, we're in those kinds of situations, we absorb learning. We absorb what we see as if it's true, even when it isn't. And so it's very likely that you may have learned relationships aren't safe. I'm not lovable. People are always going to leave me. If you have kind of that core belief inside of any of those things, I have to depend on myself because no one else is ever dependable. You're going to bring those into your romantic relationships or any relationships as an adult because somewhere in you, you fundamentally believe that's true. And if you fall in love with someone and try to become intimate, meaning try to become emotionally close to them, those core beliefs are going to bubble up like crazy and make you really have a more difficult time trusting them, bonding to them, believing they love you, believing they're going to stay with you, believing they can tolerate you making mistakes and still want to be in your life. Those core beliefs, if you bring them into your relationships, only you can heal. Ideally, you will date people who will help you, right? Because we are actually very social creatures, us humans, and we're all going to influence each other. So your mate's doing the same thing to you. Ideally, you find someone who really loves you and sees those quote unquote imperfections, sees those vulnerabilities, sees your struggles and loves you through them and is willing to say, hey, I don't like that you do this. I want you to work on it, but I'm still here. Because it's that process, that dance of intimacy, of healthy romantic relationships that actually is a catalyst for growth for everyone in it. That's a beautiful thing. Being in a committed long-term relationship does not mean you don't struggle. It means that at some level, ideally, you have chosen each other and said, I see you, you see me, and I am willing to work with you to figure it out as we go. That's really the goal, but it doesn't ever get you off the hook from working on yourself. And it doesn't get them off the hook from working on themselves either.
Do you see in shorter term relationships where there's more of that high low dynamic that reinforces those negative core wounds, and then maybe the person ghosts them, versus a steadier relationship, maybe was for a few years and then it kind of fizzled out? Do you
Mm.
notice that the first one has a tendency towards more of that love addiction, difficult breakup? And if so, why is that?
Mm-hmm. I think that it's quite common to see love addiction in those shorter relationships. But I don't think it has so much to do with the duration of the relationship because I actually see love addiction in people who are breaking up after 25 years of marriage, for example. I think it has more to do with the intensity of addiction. So, how hyper focused you are on your mate, how much you believe you need them, how much your life is consumed by this person. And if you've been with someone for 3 months, that can be really intense. Sometimes everything else is forgotten. And then the breakup is really, really rough, usually for people. But sometimes I see people who have been together for years or who have been together for decades, and their breakups are really, really addictive still. It's when you say they've been together for a couple of years and they fizzled out. For me, what that means is it's probably not addictive anymore anyway, where there isn't really this pull to be together so much. They're not hyper focused on them. They're sort of ready to move on. And I didn't say this explicitly, but it's probably important to say you're not going to be addicted to everyone you date, probably, right? So, this experience of a love addicted breakup isn't going to happen for everybody that you break up with. It's very likely that you're going to date some people and it's not going to work out and you're not going to be that affected. Still not fun, but it may not affect you in the same way. But when you really fall for someone and become fixated on them, that's when these love addicted breakups are so difficult and so challenging for people, no matter how long you've been together.
And in your professional opinion, after you go through the process of the breakup, you heal, you work on yourself, do you ever feel like it's appropriate for exes to be friends?
I get asked that a lot. And my short answer is I think it's very difficult. I rarely use the word never because I think so much in life depends and it depends on the circumstances. I think there are some exes who can become friends. And usually, when that's most effective, is when they really like each other as people, as friends, and they are not conflicted about the breakup. So maybe they dated and they were really, in love or they had a really good time, but then it was clear they were going their separate ways and they really did go their separate ways and they built lives without the other and interact from time to time in a way that still feels good and is appropriate given the boundaries that each person wants. I have seen that happen and have it seem to work for people really well. But in general, if you were really in love with someone or had an exaholic breakup where you felt addicted to them, it is very, very difficult to be friends later on.
Hmm. I agree. And you have given us so many amazing tips and advice. And I know there's so much more in your book as well. But if there's one central message of hope you would give listeners, some takeaway about letting go or healing, or if someone's in the throes of breakup, what would
Mm.
it be?
You have value, and it isn't determined by any romantic relationship now or ever. It's determined by who you are. Don't ever forget that. Your value is not dependent on your ex, and it never was.
That's so beautiful. And I think that can even be applied to even if you are in a relationship, your value's never dependent on anyone else.
100% true.
And where can people connect with you and find out more about your work?
My website is drcourtney.com. I have an Instagram channel and do some social media. I also write a blog for Psychology Today that you are welcome to follow. It's all free. It's all aimed really at helping anyone who's interested in taking core psychological material and applying it to themselves, either in the effort to be more honest with themselves or to improve their relationships, current relationships, relationships that are ended, any version of self exploration and healing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Courtney. This has been amazing, and I'm so happy you were able to join us today.
Thank you for having me. It was delightful to talk to you. I wish you and everyone listening the very best on their continued life journey.
Thank you. For those listening, I hope you feel a little less alone and more empowered to choose yourself. If you're in the midst of a breakup or stuck in heartbreak, know that healing isn't linear and your pain does not define your value. You can find Dr. Courtney's work, resources, and her books at drcourtney.com, and I'll link everything down below. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might benefit from listening. And thank you for being here. Take care of your heart, trust your journey, and remember, you deserve to heal and thrive. You are enough exactly as you are.